Evaporation, condensation, precipitation, runoff. I can't remember. Yeah, water cycle, water cycle. All right. It is currently 9:03, so at 9:05 we are going to stop right down as much as you know. Conversation for this is going to be 0. Movement is going to be 0. Do you think it's going to drop? Why do you think it's going to drop? You think some of it evaporates? Anyone? Does anyone have anything different? Any other different hypothesis? We all think the amount of water in our bag is going to drop. We all think it's going to drop? No one thinks it's going to stay the same? So you think it's going to stay the same. Why do you think it's going to stay the same? Okay. Well, I guess we're going to go find out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what tube do we use to measure how much water there is? What is that little thing called, Selena? Graduated cylinder. Mosina, how do we read a graduated cylinder? Yes? The lines on the side where the water meets. Okay, are we clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we don't need...
Go ahead. Were you the same or different?
It's different. It's less.
Selena, what'd you start with? What'd you end with?
We started with 200 and then we ended with 200.
So you stayed the same, okay. What'd you start with, Trinice?
Started with like 30
And what'd you end with?
and went down to 40.
Went down to 20. What would cause that water to evaporate? Yes. Heat. I put a sun on there. What was our sun?
The light.
The light, okay. Now here's my other problem. My hour that did it yesterday, they were losing like 5 milliliters of water. What did you notice about school today when you walked in? Oh, it's cold.
Yeah.
Really cold. Do you think that affected maybe how much water was lost?
No.
Yeah.
Because there's heating in
water in the bag full of water.
There's heating in here.
Okay. Well, wait a second. I mean, did you really lose water? Heat caused water to evaporate. One last thing.
Jason, after doing this lesson in a different way, where we did all the hands-on activities first, and we did the web quests, and then we did the lectures and reading, how do you feel about this lesson? Do you like it better than the old way, or do you like it more than, or less than the old way?
I like it better the new way because then I get to do it hands-on, and it's better. It's easier hands-on because then I get to experience what I'm doing.
Lesson and teaching it in this new way increase your interest level in what we were learning?
Sort of. Because say like somebody doesn't really know and then they want to know about it. So like say if you just do it the other way, then they'll never find out. But if you do it the hands-on way, you'll figure out the cycle and learn a little bit better.
And all the checks, do they help you to see where we're at?
Yes.
It increase your interest doing it this way.
Yes, it increased my interest doing it this way.
How?
It increased my interest because I don't like sitting down and writing out a piece of paper.
Okay, good.
Active in activities and not just sit at a desk and listen because I'm not going to be paying attention.
In summary, our UDL lesson was a lesson on the water cycle. We chose the water cycle because it is a lesson that we were going to teach within our curriculum, and we thought that the water cycle would just present a nice lesson that had a lot of hands-on activities that we could use with the kids, and it would be very functional in making a UDL hands-on lesson with this. We had to follow the NGSS standards, and this is the type of lesson planning where you have kids exploring first, and then they go into more formal teaching. So it's kind of like a flip lesson. Our big idea for our lesson was temperature from the sun affects change of water from one state to another. When water vapor gets cold, it changes to a liquid. This is called condensation. When heat is applied to water, it changes from a liquid to a gas. This is called evaporation. When the liquid gets heavy, it falls, called precipitation. And the cycle repeats. The water cycle is an endless repetitive pattern. And the kids will come to learn that all cycles are, they don't have a beginning and they don't have an end. Our essential questions for this lesson happen to be, what powers the water cycle? What states of matter are associated with the water cycle? Where does the water cycle start, reinforcing that whole concept that there is no beginning and no end? And to list and explain the different stages of the water cycle, such as what we talked about in our big idea, the condensation, the evaporation, precipitation, and so forth. Our learning objectives for this lesson is develop and explain a model of the water cycle, determine the specific phases and the changes that take place within the water cycle, such as condensation, evaporation, and precipitation again, and determine the relationship between the stages of the water cycle and the temperature. We want kids to know that there is a direct correlation that the stages or the changes in the water cycle happen because of different temperatures that they are that the water is encountering. We began our lesson doing a KWL. We wanted kids to brainstorm a little bit within themselves to see what they knew about the water cycle. Once they did that, we explored the water cycle through song and dance, and you saw that in the video. We put motions to the song so that would help kids to remember the lyrics of the song. Then we went on and we did the hands-on exploration, and we did that through the baggie lab. The baggie lab was a lab where the students measured how much water they put into a Ziploc baggie. The baggie was then put onto a bulletin board, and heat lights were then shown onto the baggies for a 24-hour period. The next day, they went through and did a check on their baggies. Okay, after they have their baggie lab set up, then we went on to do some notes, some guided notes, and we did a lecture burst. After the lecture burst and the guided notes, the students were familiar enough with some of the vocabulary and the terminology that went along with the web quest or with the water cycle, so we went on and did a web quest. After this independent exploration of a web quest, we did go through and talk about it as a whole group, and we moved on to talking to the text, which we call in our school district a T4 activity. We had our first check, which is kind of like a quiz kind of a thing. We had that shortly after the baggie activity. Then after our talking to the text, we had our second check, and we're going to call those some formative assessments. We had additional practice that we allowed the kids to explore. We had students doing some Foursquare definitions. We let them explore vocabulary further and in deeper depth on Quizlet. We had some academic-based games that the children really enjoyed as well. The projects that we used were all rubric aligned, and they had to make sure that they hit certain standards with the projects that we're about to explain to them. I will explain more about the summative assessment after I explain what was occurring on day 2. So the setting up of the baggie, the lecture burst, the notes, that all occurred on day 1. This happens to be a 2-day lesson. And on day 2, the students returned to the laboratory to check on their water cycle bags and make a list of the observations and the changes that they saw and observed that they occurred. They tried to brainstorm why these things occurred, and then we went back as a whole group and discussed what we saw and why it occurred. The students had to take the liquid out of their baggies, and again they had to pour it into a graduated cylinder and see if the volume of the baggie has gone up or down. Later that day, on day 2, we went through it and continued with our KWL, what they know, and then what they learned as well. Each day before the students left the classroom, we had quick checks where we did some quick formative assessments, and we'd ask students very quick checkup questions such as what happened to the water in the baggie, or what do you think is going to happen to the water in the baggie. We asked them, what is precipitation, what is condensation, and these are all review exit tickets that we used in the lesson. The students also had some quick checks on Socrative, where we went into the computer lab and asked them 2 questions, and the students had to give a short answer for both of those questions, so those were used as a formative assessment as well. We also asked the students for some writing input during this lesson as well, and part of that Socrative input, after they did the 2 questions, they had to answer the question, if you could tweet on social network 144 words or less, they needed to describe what the water cycle was. When we gave an assessment, formative at this point, because at the end of the whole unit we'll give the summative, but if 80% of the students were in the mastery range of the grade level, then we'd move on. 20% that didn't reach mastery, if it was 20, they would get a reteaching opportunity. Some of our classes were co-taught, and these co-taught classes had extra help in there, and there were accommodations made for specific learning styles, IEPs, and whatnot. As in all lessons, there are certain barriers and stumbling blocks that you do encounter. This lesson was no different. We did have some barriers, and it is typical to many of the barriers that we see on a continual basis here at Chatterton Middle School. One barrier that we did encounter was reading ability. The students in our school have varied reading abilities, and many of them have very low reading abilities, which hinders, unfortunately, what they can do by themselves. So that was one of our accommodations that we made within our unit. We were able to take any reading that we had, and we did a text-to-speech and upload it into our Weebly account. So any student that wanted to have the reading, they could listen to it orally through Weebly, text-to-speech program on there. A lot of our students have difficulty working effectively in groups, unfortunately. Sometimes they can't, and so it takes extra monitoring. And especially in our co-taught classes, at least we have 2 teachers there to assist with the monitoring of students that are having difficulty working within a co-taught situation. Other students that were less effective in working in a social situation in small groups, we were able to divide them up into smaller groups. Some maybe even had to work by themselves or within maybe just a partner. So that's how we addressed that. We also divided tasks up within the group because they really have a hard time saying who's going to do what, who's going to do the other thing. A lot of times our stronger students academically take over and feel like they have to carry the load of the assignment, and we try to steer away from that, and so we try to break it up, and one student might be in charge of writing down observations. Maybe another one is in charge of taking down the data, things like that. So we broke down the groups into, they had tasks assigned within the group. We broke down large assignments into small sequential steps. That's very helpful for many of our special ed kids and many of our slow learners. So we're able to take a big assignment, chunk it down, and have them understand it better and have greater comprehension, and therefore they have greater success within the lesson. And what was nice about this unit is we were able to pull in some extra assistance. Sometimes we have co-teachers, but we pulled in some parents and had some extra assistance in our labs, and so that was very helpful as well. It was able to give the students more of a lower child to adult ratio. Results and analysis. Our qualitative data would be how they did on their projects, of course, and how they're doing on their labs, answers answered orally in class, answers on worksheets, web quests, and etc. As far as quantitative data goes, we used our pre-test, post-test. Pre-test, the students had 61% of the 64 students that took the test were 61% below basic. We had 20% that scored basic, 3% were proficient, and 16% were far below basic. We like to have most of our numbers, of course, in advanced and proficient. We'd like to stay away from the basic, far below basic, and below basic categories. However, on our post-tests, our students were getting 56% proficient, 20% advanced, 6 below basic, and 18% were basic. No students were testing far below basic. So that's pretty good news. It looks like we did reach 76% of the students, of the 64 students that were tested. Actually, it was 82 students that were tested were getting mastery scores. So we're pretty happy with that. The students that had a 70% or better, we did take and reteach and give them another opportunity to master this information and these concepts. Okay, we did do a comparison of the water cycle from the unit from the 2012 school year and 2013 school year to the quiz that we gave this year, and we did see that using the NGSS standard type of format and UDL lesson planning, that our students' scores did go up quite a bit, and that actually was 90 total tested. They would get 61, 24 correct and 10 incorrect. So we have a little bit better mastery of the concepts this year, and we're pretty pleased about that. Student voice, feedback from students. We were asking some of the students in a video how they felt about this style of a lesson, because we have not taught like this before. We haven't taught having kids get hands-on and explore lessons the way that we did this year with the NGS lessons. And it's not just the water cycle lesson. We have been planning this way since September. And the kids, their feedback was pretty positive. They said that they like to get in and get in some hands-on activities first, and then they thought that they liked that because some said that it was too boring for them to sit in class, and they liked doing hands-on activities, and they felt that they learned better when they did hands-on activities. So that's the area that we're going for. That's the direction we're shooting for, and it seems like the students are responding. So we're just going to keep plugging along with it. Hopefully we'll get more training in that area too. Student work. Okay, our summative assessment was project-based, and this isn't the end of the whole unit. This is just the end of our water cycle lesson, which we entitled Splish Splash. Tried to get a little cute with it. But the students had a choice. They could write a story. They could tell a story through using VoiceThread. They could create a song like they learned at the beginning of the unit. They could create a stop-motion movie, an iMovie. They could create a diorama. They could make a public announcement, advertisement, a commercial, or a cartoon storyboard on Toondo. So we had quite a few kids wanting to do dioramas and storytelling and movies and things like that. We ran into a few difficulties because our iPads did not support some of the applications that we needed for our final project. So I guess that would be included as one of our barriers as well, that we have to make sure that we get those uploaded for next year. I hope you liked our movie, our presentation, and hopefully that this was a thorough explanation of what we went through, and we really enjoyed making this. And on behalf of Emily Petrosky, Sunny DeMesa, and myself, Sharon Sylvester, we'd like to thank you very much.